for studying abroad. We guide students with their career decisions and help them with the application process to foreign universities. And we are very pleased today to bring to you Professor Jonathan Whittaker, who has more than 15 years of experience in the film industry. We also have with us today Lizzie Zach, the Associate Director of Strategic Initiatives at NYFA, who will shortly introduce more NYFA and Professor Whittaker in more details. After the class, at the end of the class, there will be time for everyone to ask questions. We will also be issuing certificate of attendance after the class. So if the students who are interested in getting this certificate, please leave a message to us with your name, email address, and phone number. You can also contact Father Tejas and let him know of your interest. And I would like to again thank Father Tejas for his encouragement and initiative to make this class possible. I would like to also thank Jonathan and Lizzie for taking time out so early in the morning today. And to the students, I would like to say I hope you enjoy and learn something more about filmmaking today. Over to you, Lizzie.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us. We are very happy to be here, and we apologize for the delay. We're just learning new things today. So, as Smriti said, I am the Associate Director of Strategic Initiatives here at the New York Film Academy. So my job is to work with partner relations pretty much all over the world. So I am partners with Globed, and we're very excited to be here with you today. Just as a very brief overview, New York Film Academy is a very hands-on and intensive visual and performing arts school that has classes all the way from teen programs, short-term workshops, 1- and 2-year conservatories, as well as bachelor's degrees and master's degrees. And we have 5 full-time locations worldwide, 3 in the United States, 1 in Italy, and 1 in Australia. And what we are known for more than anything really is learning by doing. You're going to learn to make movies by making movies. You're going to learn to act by acting. So if you are interested in getting more information about the New York Film Academy, please do leave your name, and Globed will reach out to you, and we can set up one-on-one meetings. We can sort of go through the entire admissions process and what we offer, and I'm more than happy to speak with anybody. But you're not here to listen to me talk today. So let me introduce Jonathan Whittaker. Jonathan is the chair of our short-term programs and filmmaking at the New York Film Academy New York campus. He has produced and directed short films, music videos, concerts, commercials, TV shows, you guys name it. Jonathan has probably done it. So I am going to give it over to Jonathan right now, and he will give you an amazing show. Jonathan.
Well, thank you, Lizzie. Hopefully you all can hear me. And as Lizzie said, thank you for being patient with us this evening as we learn new things. As she said, that's what's great about living, right? Every day you wake up and you get to learn something new. Father, thank you so much for hosting us and having us. It brings me great joy, as you saw from my bio, to be able to share with you all my thoughts on the art and craft of directing and cinematography. And it also brings me warm feelings to hear the sound or the cacophony of beeping in the background where you are. It brings me back to my days of living in Mumbai. And I think very fondly of India, and I miss it dearly. So I'm very happy to wake up this morning, happy to be here, and very excited to share with you all some of the things I've learned about directing. And that's what we'll talk about today. We'll talk about directing and directing as communicator. But before, I'm sorry, I should also thank Globed for hosting us as well. It's a great partnership, and we really value that. So, as Lizzie said, and as Father said, my name is Jonathan Whittaker, and I am the chair of short-term filmmaking in New York City at the New York Film Academy. But I have taught globally. I've taught in India on many occasions, and hope to come back someday. But all over the globe, and also work as a director. So, in addition to being a lecturer and being an admin, my main passion is being on set and working as a director and a producer but I spent many years coming up in the industry, working in the grip and electric departments, working as an assistant camera. I even worked as assistant wardrobe, but I worked my way up, to cinematographer and then eventually director. But what we're going to talk about today is what is storytelling, and at the heart of it, right? Storytelling is effective communication. And in order to effectively communicate, you need to understand the language, right? We understand the language that we use with our collaborators, but also the language that we use to communicate our story to the audience. And so that's what we're going to touch upon today. I hope to speak to you all for, maybe 40 minutes to 45 minutes. And then I'm not sure. And again, forgive me, this is where the learning process comes in. I'm not entirely familiar with this platform, but I'm hoping that we have the ability to have a bit of an exchange, a Q&A. If that's not possible, that's okay. I can anticipate your questions and maybe answer them for you anyway. So I'm going to try something really fast. I'm going to try to share my screen and to share a presentation I have. I won't read it to you because I'm sure you all can read, but I will use it as a jumping off point to speak more anecdotally and to give you examples. So bear with me. I'm going to try this and hopefully this will work. And if not, then
there we are.
I'll try something else. Has my camera been on at all this whole time?
Yeah, your camera was on, but you need to share it.
When I do share, it's showing that it's turned the camera off.
No, well, just beside the camera, we have the microphone. Then we have an arrow mark there. Share content. Yeah.
I do say it. And it brings up the share tray. Let me see. Maybe it's because I have PowerPoint open in a separate screen. Let's see if I try something different. Again, I appreciate everyone's patience.
Oh, that's fine. Don't worry.
Father, I knew you'd have patience. So I actually did teach at it was a Jesuit college in Mumbai.
Well, this is also a Jesuit college.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, it was in 2011.
Okay.
That I was there. So
that is with Father Michael must have been, yeah.
Yeah, we were much younger back then, a decade ago. So you know what? It's not quite working for me, and that's okay. I think what I will do is, as to not waste anyone else more time, let's just get started. And if I, maybe I can share this presentation with everybody. I'll share it with the organizers, and maybe they can share it with you all. So I think you're stuck with just seeing me, in other words. So if everyone can see and hear me, I think we'll go with that, and we'll go from there. So let's talk then about communication, right? Who does a director need to communicate to, right? If the director is the main creative force on any content project, so when I say content, obviously I'm speaking in general terms. We talk about film at the Film Academy, but really, you need a director on a commercial, on a music video, on a documentary, on short form digital, on a mini series, on television shows, on a web series, right? So just any content. We'll speak very broadly today. And so the director's job, obviously, is the main communicator. And with whom does the director then need to communicate? Well, the crew, right? You need to share your vision to the crew. And the crew are all the technical artists who come to work on your film. Right, so everyone from the production designer to the gaffer, who's the chief lighting technician, to hair and makeup and wardrobe, and to the AD, everybody, script supervisor, everybody who comes as your crew to work on this project to help you realize the vision for the project. And how do you communicate with your crew? Well, the best way to communicate is through references, right? If you're making visual content, the best way to communicate to them what your vision is through visual references. So maybe that's photographs, maybe that's other films, maybe it's paintings, something that they can see, and you can say, look, this is what my story looks like. This is what my story feels like. Sometimes you can even share with them audio clips and say, this is what my story sounds like, right? And this is the story that we're going to tell. But you also need to share with them too, what is the story about, right? At its heart, before you can go out and direct, you have to be able to take a script and to distill it to a single sentence. What is the premise? Sometimes we call it the through line. Some people refer to it as the log line. They all pretty much mean the same exact thing. What is your story about? At its heart, not the plot, not what the characters are doing, but at its heart, what are you trying to say? What is its thesis? Right? And so what I mean by that is that, you can take a film, you can take like a story like Romeo and Juliet and say, well, Romeo and Juliet, the premise of that would be that love conquers all. Even in death, love conquers all. And that is the premise. Now, that becomes the guiding force for every decision that you make and every decision that your crew makes. Another example would be, if you're familiar with the film by Orson Welles called Citizen Kane. And Citizen Kane, you could say that the premise is that external splendor does not buy happiness, or money can't buy you love, right? Another way of saying it. And that becomes then, again, the guiding force for every creative choice that you and your crew make in the production of your story. And so again, if you look at Citizen Kane, again, if we think about like what that story is about, it's about a man who made it to the greatest heights. He built this huge media empire. He amassed so much wealth, yet he was never happy. He never had true love in his life. And that is reflected in everything. Look at the sets. You have these huge palatial sets with tons of room and depth, but they're empty. There's nothing there. There's no real substance there. And if you look at the cinematography, Greg Tolan, the cinematographer, employed very wide angle lenses, very short focal length, which exaggerated space, but also gave this deep depth of field where you could see everything from the foreground all the way to the background. And that enabled them to block things in the different, in foreground, midground, and background areas. But again, creating this sense of emptiness, of empty space. And so you need to first distill that down, right? If you're going to go out and direct something, I don't care if it's short form or if it's a feature length, what is your story about? So what is it about? And then what does it look like? And that's the best way to communicate to your crew. It's also important too, that as a director, because you are the leader of all of these different departments, it's important that you know something about them. So if you want to be a director, it is important that you understand the craft of screenwriting. Right? You need to know how a story goes together. You need to know how a story is written too in proper screenplay format. It is expected and incumbent upon every director that when they take over a project, when they're brought onto a project, that you get into that script and you make a bit of it yours. You're not tearing it down and do a complete rewrite, but there is an expectation that you are going to work with a screenwriter or by yourself and maybe make some changes to dialogue or some changes to scenes. And so you need to know what goes into that. You also need to know what makes for a good story, right? That's the foundation upon which everything is built. So it doesn't matter if you're the best director of actors or you understand camera so well or you're a great visual effects person. If the story is not good, it doesn't matter. So it's important to understand story. It's important that you understand cinematography. And again, maybe you don't know all of the formulas and all the physics and math behind it, because it is a science. It's an art and a science combination. But it is important that you understand the difference of focal lengths. It's important to understand the difference of shutter speeds and what it's going to do to the image, because part of what we're doing is using the cinematography to work as a visual metaphor for what the characters are going through. Right? It's the medium. It's what we do, like the use of lenses and the use of camera movement. All of that gives the audience an indication about what the character is experiencing, and that's how they better empathize with the characters. It's important that you understand that this way you're empowered, right? You want to be able to make, excuse me, you want to be able to make informed, creative decisions, and so you need to be informed. And so immerse yourself in the different disciplines: editing, screenwriting, production design, cinematography, audio, sound design, audio recording. It's important that you understand those, because if you're going to communicate with them, you want to be able to communicate effectively with them. The next group of people, so that's our crew, right? And when does that happen? Sorry. before I leave the crew, let's talk about when that really happens. Well, most of the communication with the crew happens in pre-production, right? It's in the lead up to production that you're really in these development meetings, and you're and you're going back and forth and talking about what it looks and sounds like, and what is the intent of every scene, and how do we build momentum within the scenes, and what is the color palette, right? And what are the sound elements? All of that should happen before you ever step foot on set. Now, of course, you have to be open to what's happening in the moment, and you make amendments to that plan, but you need to know all that before you even step foot there. And how do we do that too is you don't want to micromanage. I know it's hard as a director. I still find it very hard after many years of experience to be able to give autonomy, to be able to like let the cinematographer do their job, let the production designer do their job. It's not our job to micromanage and make every single decision as directors. It's our job to share the vision for the project, to inspire those people, and then let them go out and work to the best of their ability, and let them feel as if they're making creative choices because they'll care about it that much more. When people feel like they have input on a project, part of that project becomes a bit of them. And now it's not just about showing up to make a paycheck. It's showing up because you're making something that represents you. And you want everyone to feel that on your set. And so you want to set that tone very early on in pre-production. Who else are we communicating with? We're communicating with the cast, right? The actors, the people that come to embody your characters, right? That's who the audience comes to see. That's who the audience empathizes with. They're the emotional surrogates for the audience. And so it's really important that we're getting the performances that the film needs. And this is your number one responsibility. Oftentimes we think as directors that our job is to worry about the image and the sound and all of that, and like the actors do their own thing. That's not true. When it comes to the day of shooting, you are as responsible for the performance as the actors are. There's no such thing as a director as saying like as scapegoating and saying, well, the performance was bad because the actors were bad. There's no bad acting. There's only bad directing. And so you might be asking yourself, might be like, well, okay, Jonathan, you say that, but what if the actor just isn't good, right? What if the actor wasn't, they couldn't do the role on that day, or they couldn't do the role, wasn't in them? Well, then it was bad casting. So it still comes back to you, right? So there's no scapegoating. Your job is to make sure that the actors can get to the place that you need them to be for the film. And there's a way in which we do that, right? There's a way in which we don't do that, and there's ways in which we do that. And there's many ways to work with actors because no two actors are the same. But there's definitely ways we don't want to work with actors, and I can share that with you. But thinking about communicating with actors, I like to do this little thought experiment and kind of by asking a question. How do we get actors to do what we want? As a director, how do I get an actor to do what I want? And the answer is you don't. You get the actor to want what the film needs. So in other words, it's not about getting the actor to do something that I, Jonathan Whittaker, want them to do. It's about getting them to a place where they, in the skin of the character, living in that character, in that role, where they want nothing more than what that scene needs at that moment. So in other words, it's about getting them to a place where they're living truthfully in the given circumstances. And if they know what has happened to them, and if they know based on what has happened to them, what they want then as that character, and why it's important that they want that, what's at stake, they will fight for that. And whatever that is, whatever that fight is, whatever that struggle is, whatever that proper emotion is in the given circumstances, that's what the scene needs. So it's not about me because the director says, I want you to cry. It's them crying because they're so, they can do nothing more than cry. And so it's about getting them to that place. And so it's just a different way of thinking about working with talent. It's not about bending them to my will. It's about making sure they know what's happened to them and making sure that they've connected to that on an emotional level. And then seeing what they want to do in the skin of the character, because that's what will be right for the scene. And that's what will be right for your story. And it's our job to guide them on that path. And this happens mostly during production, right? Again, on the day of shooting, that is your job. Your job is to be there for the actors. Your job is not to be looking through the camera. Your job is not to be setting up lights. Your job is not to be, doing the set and playing with props and doing that stuff. You have other people who do that. As long as you have a budget where you actually have a crew, right? You have people who do that. You have the cinematographer is responsible for everything that goes in the camera and lighting. The production designer is responsible for everything that goes into the image that's not camera and lighting. So everything from hair, makeup, wardrobe, to the set, to the props and the furniture, that all falls under the production designer. Your script supervisor is responsible for continuity and taking notes on the different takes. Your AD is responsible for making sure that you get your shot list and you get that done in the time that you have allocated for that shot list. Your sound technician, your sound recordist, your sound mixer, they're responsible for getting the sound elements. So all the things that go into your film, someone else is really taking care of. You're responsible for the acting. Right? And you need to own it like the actors do. So work with them. Okay, so who does the director communicate with? The crew, the cast, right? And clearly I'm just going over these in brief overviews. I mean, we spend our lifetime learning how to do this, right? This is what we're moving towards, and this is what we study and what we actively work on every day on set. But ultimately, who do we communicate with? It's the audience. Right? It's the audience. It's the audience with whom we're sharing our story. And so we need to know what is the language that we use to communicate to the audience, to share the story. And we have to ask ourselves at all times, during pre-production, during production, and post-production, what does the audience need to know right now? In order for them to understand my story, what do they need to know? And then I ask myself, well, how do I want to make them feel about what they now know? And so if I can answer those two questions, then that becomes my guiding force then for how I design the story and how I present the story. And so how do we communicate with the audience as a director? Well, cinema is a visual language. Right? Film is a visual language. Video is a visual language. And just like we have in the written word or the spoken word, I just said word, just like we have in the spoken or written language, we use words. As a director, we don't use words, right? There is dialogue in films, but that's not for communicating to the audience. That's dialogue is there to serve the purpose of the character, not to communicate to the audience. How do we communicate to the audience? Well, our words are the shot, right? And so for us, like the shot is tantamount to the word. And just like, hopefully in life, as you communicate with people around you, whether written or verbal, hopefully you're choosing your words carefully because you know that words have meaning. And you're thinking about at all times, when I say this, what is the intended outcome? Like, why am I using this word, right? Or this string of words? What is the intended outcome? What do I want the person who's hearing these to feel? What do I want them to do? It's the same for a director. We use shots, and there's many different considerations that go into the shot. And based on those considerations, we know how the audience is going to then interpret that and feel what is the intended outcome of that. And to kind of carry the analogy further, right? If you think about like an author of say a book, right? To me, there's an equivalency of an author to a book and an author of a film, the director of a film. And so the smallest increment that an author uses is the word, right? The director, it's the shot. So for the author, you have a word, and the words make up a sentence. The sentences then make up a paragraph. The paragraphs then make up a chapter. The chapters then make up the book, right? For film, it's like we have the shot. And then a sequence of shots make up the scene, which would be like the sentence. And then a sequence of scenes equal actually a sequence, right? And then the sequences equal the acts, the 3 acts, and then those acts equal the film. So, but we break it down to the smallest increment. So just the way you think about it, like think about the shot as a word. And so then what are the considerations that go into the shot? Well, as I said, there are many. And the first indication of like, how do I take this written word and put it into the visual language of shots? The first indication for me when I'm breaking down a story is what I'm seeing in my mind's eye, right? When you're reading a script, when you're reading anything, any narrative, any story, any retelling of a story, you're seeing it play out in your mind's eye, right? So that is a very good indication of what ultimately your film could look like. That's what we call the director's intuition. What are you seeing, right? Where are you placing yourself based on what you're reading, what the author, what the screenwriter wrote? So what are we actually seeing? And so you take inventory of that as you're reading the script for the second and third and fourth time. You're taking notes in the margins of the script, right? What are you actually seeing? Is it a wide shot of, is it like you're seeing the whole location, or are we focused on someone's face, right? What elements do you visually see in your mind? Because that's probably what you want to show the audience. And so one of the first things we think about is shot size. And shot size is, it's universal. There are 6 shot sizes, no matter where you are in the world, doesn't matter. This is a universal language. There's a universal grammar to cinema. There are 6 different shot sizes. They may have slightly different names. There might be variations of them, but there are only 6. An extreme wide shot. An extreme wide shot would be a shot where it's like, you know, it feels like the cameras are very far back, and what we're seeing is this landscape, and you see the majority of what you see and can focus on is the setting. And you might see a character, but a character can be very tiny in reference to the overall frame. And so what the director is saying there is look at the landscape, look at the setting, right? See what elements are present here at this location. And so that's what's most dominant in the frame. That's what's most important. And so that would answer the question, like, what does the audience need to know? Well, if you're showing an extreme wide shot, you're saying, well, the audience has to know where we are. You know, it's important for you as a director, as a storyteller, to set the setting so the audience understands all the elements that are about to be part of the scene. The next shot size would be a wide shot or full shot, or sometimes called long shot. I don't always like to use long shot because sometimes we get that confused with duration. There's nothing to do with duration. But wide shot or full shot, and that's where the character is from head to toe, filling the majority of frame from top to bottom. And in a wide shot or full shot, we get, you know, it's like 50-50. We get 50% location, 50% character in regards to what is the important element, or what is the subject of the frame. And here you'd be saying to the audience too, you'd be saying, okay, look at the location. It's important that you understand where we are. This can work for an establishing shot, right? To establish the audience in that setting, in that scene, like where are we? But also you're saying, look at my character too. You're saying, look at the character's physicality. How are they carrying themselves through space? What are they feeling? How do they feel about the other people? Like, are they keeping distance? Are they leaning in? Like, what are they doing? Or you can see then how they feel about themselves and about the other characters or the other elements in the frame. So that's answering again, what does the audience need to know? Then moving in, we have a medium shot. A medium shot would be from the waist to the top of the head on a character. And now you can see that we're clearly moving from establishing where we are and setting to emphasis on character. And now you can see a little bit still the physicality, right? Because we can see from the waist to the top of the head, we can see with the characters, how they're kind of interacting and moving through space, how are they holding their body. But we're starting to get a little bit to the internal. We're leaving the external world and we're moving a little bit to the internal world, showing the audience what the character is thinking, in addition to what they're giving off. It's what's on the inside as well. And we get a little bit of information about the setting, but this wouldn't work for an establishing shot. This is not about, you're not saying, look at the location. You're saying, look at the character, and you get some information about the location. The next shot would be a medium close-up. A medium close-up is what I'm in right now, I think. It should be a medium close-up from like the chest to the top of the head. And so now, you know, it's really about the character. You can see some information around me, and you probably made some determination about who I am as a person based on what you see behind me, because that's what we do as humans. We're always trying to tell a story. But it's really about the character, right? It's really about like, okay, it's less about the external and now it's more about the internal. Then we have a close-up. Close-up would be from the top of the shoulders to the top of the head. So from here to the top of the head. Now it's all about the internal, right? Now it's all about the character. It's not about the location. It's about the reaction of the character, or it's about what the character's thinking, what the character's feeling. And so the information that you're giving is that. What is the character thinking and feeling? What is their internal landscape, not the external landscape? And then the very next shot would be an extreme close-up. Extreme close-up is like just detail of the eyes, or maybe the lips, or like fingers, something really tight, a really tight shot, an extreme close-up. And now you're saying, look at this. This, whatever this one element is, this is really important. Right? Pay attention to this one thing, because it's going to have great impact on the story. You know, actually, speaking of having impact on the story and about the size of the shot, you know, Alfred Hitchcock had a rule and it's a pretty good rule. And the rule was the size of the object in the frame must be directly proportional to the importance of the object in the story. And that's, that's something good to think about, right? Like the size of the object. So like, what is the shot size? Are we putting this object in a close-up, an extreme close-up, or like really wide and far away from them? And it's saying the size of that's the sound of a New York City street. The size of an object in the frame, right? So what does it look like? How big is it in the frame? That must be directly proportional to the importance of that object in the story. So in other words, if you put something in an extreme close-up, or even a close-up, or even a medium close-up, if you frame something that way, you're telling the audience, pay attention to this. This is really important. Their expectation that it's going to be important. And if you don't pay off that expectation, you're miscommunicating. Anyway, I digress. Shot size. So when we think about shot sizes, right? Extreme wide, wide, medium close-up, extreme close-up. What we first think about is, what are we seeing, right? What are we actually seeing in the frame? Because that answers the question, what does the audience need to know? What are you showing them, right? What are you saying to look at? What can they actually see? What can they discern? What information are you giving them? Again, if we go back to just the example of looking at me, because unfortunately, that's all I can show you right now. And hopefully you're seeing me. If you look at me, right? So what am I showing you? Well, you can see me in a medium close-up, and you can see the way I'm speaking and kind of my mannerisms, and you can hopefully connect to me as a human being. But you're also getting information around me too. You maybe see like some paintings on the wall, a lamp and stuff, and you start to get an idea of like, I guess, my lifestyle and the kind of things that I would put in my home or my office, if you assume it was my office. So like that comes from shot size, right? If we went to like an extreme close-up, that might be a bit scary, but like you would get less of that information, right? So what information are we giving? But shot size also answers the question too, how do you want the audience to feel? And that has to deal with like, how do I want the audience to feel about my character? And what do I mean by that? Well, when shot size, like, when we think about an extreme wide shot, we're very far from the character, right? And if you think about a close-up, it feels very near to the character. So that perceived distance has an impact on the way in which we feel about the character. And that comes from something that's called proxemics theory. And proxemics theory is something that we demonstrate, we exhibit, right? Psychologists have picked up on this, that we as humans, the way in which we interact with other humans, is that we keep a certain distance based on our relationship to those humans. And this is something that you know and experience on a daily basis, right? I'm pretty sure that you get on a bus or a train or elevators that tend to have a lot of people on them that can be packed, right? That part of life is natural, right? We're in very close distance, close proximity to people. But usually what we don't do though is we don't go around and make eye contact with everybody who's in our close proximity. And we don't do that because we don't know them. Like they are sharing our intimate space. They're inside of our intimate bubble. We don't know them intimately. So we try not to acknowledge the fact that they're that close to us. Maybe we're nice and we acknowledge them, but we don't, continue to hold their gaze. And so what that means is that we as humans, we keep distance based on relationship. And this is something that, you have felt before. When someone gets a little too close to you and you don't know them on a certain level, your first instinct is to back up. And so that's proxemics. That's all that it is, right? We keep distance based on relationship. But in film, as directors, we get to dictate that. We get to dictate relationship. So we get to build relationship based on perceived distance. So it's the reverse. So this answers the question, how do I want the audience to feel? And specifically about my characters. So if I want the audience to feel that they know this character, that they like this character, that they have, they've shared intimate moments with this character, they understand who they are, right? I will put those characters in medium close-ups to close-ups because that distance will create relationship. If I want the audience to not really associate with a character, to feel distant from that character, I'll keep them in wide shots or medium shots, because a medium shot would be social distance. Like you might know them, but you don't know them well. They might be a friend of a friend, right? So again, just thinking about just shot size alone, there's many different things that we can think about what we're trying to communicate to the audience. What information am I giving? How do I want them to feel about that information? How do I want them to feel about my characters? Something else that we think about too. Okay, so where I know that I want to do a full shot or a wide shot. Well, that's great. I got that information down. But now I'm on set, right? And we got to think about, where do I place that camera? And hopefully you think about this before you get to set. But let's say we got to set. Where do I place that camera? Right? Why a wide shot can come from anywhere. But where do I place it specifically in relation to the character's eye line? This is the way that we think about it as directors. So this is my eye line right here, right? If you drew a line straight through my nose, in between my eyes, this is my eye line. So where do I place the camera in relation to that on any given character? Because I can put it anywhere I want, right? That's one of the great things about storytelling through film is that you get to take the audience by the hand and say, hey, look at it from over here, or look at it from up here, or look at it from there, down there, back there, right? You can put them anywhere you want. That camera can go anywhere, especially now with the technology that we have, right? But where are you putting them and why are you putting them there? What are you trying to communicate? So just simply by changing where you place that camera in relation to the eye line, and we think about it in degrees, right? This would be 0 degrees. If I just change that, to 45 degrees, that changes the way that the audience feels about it. Or if I change it to 90 degrees, right? That changes the way the audience feels about the story, the way they feel about the scene, about how they feel about their relationship to the character, right? I mean, if when Lizzie and Father they introduced me and I came on camera, I came on your screen at home, and I said, "Hi, everybody. I'm so excited, to be speaking to you this morning about something I love, the art and craft of directing. I miss India, all these things, right? How engaged do you feel, or would you feel with me? Would you feel as if you are a participant in this workshop, or would you feel like you're observing something else, that you're observing someone else having the workshop?" Well, I would think it's the latter, right? And so there's a reason why, of course, that we try to open up and we're communicating to somebody, that we try to, make eye contact, or at least have the ability to see our eyes, because it's a deeper level of engagement with me and the relationship between me and you. And it's the same with the audience, right? It's the same if we're telling a story. Even if I weren't speaking directly to you and I were just off camera like this and we were close to 0 degrees, you feel a deeper level of engagement and involvement within the scene. And you have a stronger relationship with the character if you're seeing their face. So, where are we placing them? That's something that we have to think about as well. And then something else we think about too. Again, there are many considerations, and we can't get through them all today. But if we think again about like meaning behind shots, it all goes into the design of it. What is the height? Okay, so I know I want to place it at 2 degrees, right? Let's say like this is 2 degrees off of eye axis. What about the height of the camera? Where do I want to place that in relation to the height of my character's eyes? Well, what am I trying to say? What do I want the audience to know? Right? If I want the audience to know that they feel like they're superior, like they're in command of that scene, whatever it is happening in that scene, I can place the camera below eye level. Right? And that'll communicate to the audience that this character is dominant, right? Because it looks different if we have something shooting up at somebody as opposed to shooting down at somebody. If I want the audience to understand that this character feels inferior, that this character feels as if they're not in charge of the scene, that they're not in command of whatever it is that's happening, I can place it above eye level. And so that's what the audience will understand. It's also what they'll feel about the character. They'll feel as if this character is dominant if you place it below. They'll feel as if this character is inferior if you place it above. And that's true to human life too, right? I mean, it's a pretty well-known fact that the majority of world leaders, whether those are governmental or corporate leaders, business leaders, are over 6 feet tall. It's just true. Are tall people better leaders? Are they smarter? Are they? Are they better leaders? I don't think so. I don't think your height has anything to do with your ability to make decisions and to lead people. But there is something true about if we have to physically look up to somebody, we psychologically start to look up to them. It's just a fact. But that's what we take knowing that and we bring that into how we're communicating within our stories, and how we're designing our shots. So these are just some of the considerations, some other ones too. And again, I wish I had all day to sit here with y'all and to really kind of break this down and show you some examples too. But some other considerations that go into it are what the lens that you're using. Is there camera movement? If there is, how does it move? Why does it move? What is the framing of it, right? How are we putting this rectangle around what we just blocked and worked out? What is the color of it, right? What is the depth of field? There are many considerations that go into the shot. I just went through 3 of them, right? Shot size, angle, and height. Those are the ones that we think of first when we're seeing it in our mind's eye. And as a director, it is our job to come up with that shot list and to put all of these considerations into that shot list. So that becomes the blueprint for everybody who comes to work on our project, right? For our cinematographer, for our AD, for our production designer, to be able to actually then execute those shots. And so what I had hoped to communicate this morning was that, in order to be an effective communicator, you need to know the language, right? That part is probably obvious. And you need to know the language, again, of like the vernacular, like the language of what these technicians know, what these actors and artists know, like how to communicate to them in their language. And so it's important that you understand their roles and you can empathize with them. And so that's everyone helps make the project, right? But it's also equally, if not more important, that you understand the language of cinema, that you understand how an audience is going to read a frame, how they're going to understand your story, and how it's going to make them feel. So I would say, like, as a great exercise you can do is just watch a film or look at an image, look at a still image and take emotional inventory. What does it say to you? Because if you look at one image, your brain will tell you a story, right? The brain always seeks that storytelling and closure, understanding what's happening, and then say, well, why do I feel that way? And go look at that image and think, why do I feel that way about the subject? Why did I come up with that story? And just start to kind of decoding that, because we do this every day anyway, right? I mean, you're looking at film, you're looking at content, you can't not see it. There's media everywhere, but we don't always stop to think about it. So stop and think about it. Like, okay, take an inventory. Why am I thinking what I'm thinking? Why am I feeling what I'm feeling? What is at play here? What am I seeing? Another good exercise to do too is to to really understand how, like, say, a master director takes the written word, puts it into the visual language. So I think y'all can still hear me. Another good exercise to do too is to find a movie that you love, right? Movie that you've loved. It can be an iconic movie, it can be a new movie, whatever it is, but something that resonated with you, some movie that you really admired, and find that script. You can pretty much find any script online. So find the script online, read 10 pages of the script, and then watch 10 minutes of the movie. And what that will show you in kind of almost in real time is how a director takes the written word and puts it into the visual language. And you'll start learning from other people. And that's how we learn, right? We, as artists, we're always standing on the backs of those who came before us. And so that can be a great exercise too, to kind of further your education. But one thing I do want to communicate before we get into any Q&A or say goodbye is that I talk about the considerations that go into the shot. And there are, and it's a multitude of considerations, right? And again, hopefully you're really choosing your shots carefully, just like you would choose your words carefully. But what I don't want to communicate or get us into is paralysis by analysis. I don't want you to like overthink it, right? At the end of the day, follow your intuition. Answer the questions, what does the audience need to know? Just so they can understand the story, so I can build momentum within the scene. What do I need to show them? What needs to be in the frame so they can understand the story? And then how do I want to make them feel? If you can answer, like if we can just really dumb it down to that, if you can answer those 2 questions within the scene, right? And that's based on what you said was the premise of your story, you'll be okay, right? You'll be good. And trust your teammates, trust your collaborators, right? Filmmaking is a collaborative art form. You're a director, not a dictator, right? So collaborate with people, inspire them, and go out and make films. So that's going to wrap it up for me in regards to my presentation. We didn't really get into any shared presentation, but I don't know if Lizzie, if you want to repopulate the screen, or Father, if you do. I don't know if there is a Q&A feature to this.
Yes, I thought so.
I'm gonna take a sip of water. I've been
Yeah, sure.
now you know firsthand, not just from my bio, that I really like talking about film and cinema. If you let me, I would talk about it for the next 4 hours. But no one needs to hear me speak for that long. Are there any questions out there?
So anybody wants to ask any question, you're most welcome to ask. By the way, that was actually a lovely talk about the camera that you have said. The camera is basically telling a story. Yeah, whether it is 6 shots, which is actually universal. Yeah, that actually talks of its own. It's not purely a technical matter. It's more than that. It's a storytelling. Yeah, it's. And also I liked that even a particular any slide in itself can talk volumes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
We always, we see a single shot and our brain automatically tells us a story, right? That's how we understand the world, is through storytelling. And it's, but you're right, it's not, excuse me. Oftentimes we look at a camera and lighting and we think about like it being sometimes a technical impediment to telling our story, but really what they are tools for the storyteller to tell the story, and they're creative tools. Once we kind of master the technical side of it, then it's all about making choices that serve story, as opposed to choices out of necessity.
Absolutely. If anybody wants to ask any question, please show yourself and ask question.
And if not, that's okay too. As I said, sometimes I can anticipate questions. And oh, we have somebody?
Yeah. Who was it? Prithvi, is it?
Amlan is there, Father.
Amlan? Okay.
Yes, Father.
Well, Amlan, yes, please.
I am audible, right?
Yes, yes, of course.
Okay. Yeah. First of all, good evening, Jonathan. Good evening, Father. Thanks for this amazing opportunity. And it was really eye-opening for most of us. I am quite sure, because the point you have mentioned about proximity theory, which were completely unknown to us. About means we do shot analysis and shot division, but it's quite hard to decide where to choose what shot exactly. So I think proximity theory clears somewhat of it, and I'm sure there are lots of reading need to be done to achieve certain level of decision making. I would like to ask Jonathan one thing, that is, the filmmaking is such a it's spontaneous and process that should be based on our intuitions that you have always. But did this question ever cross your mind, like whether you are doing justice to a script or a text? It's a whole entire crew process. So any department going wrong can ruin the entire film. So is there a way to know whether I'm doing justice to the text or something?
Emma, thank you for the feedback. Thank you for the question. Yes, and so we spoke about proxemics theory and many considerations that go into the shot. And further reading, I would say, yeah, I think for further reading, just again, watch films. Let that be your reading. Watch films and then decide how you feel about a character, because there are 3 ways within a scene to build empathy for a given character or to create point of view. One of them is shot size, and that has to do with perceived distance. The other one is the angle of the camera in relation to eye line. The closer you are to 0 degrees, the more you will empathize with the character. And the last one is screen time. And so the person who has more time on screen is the person with whom we will associate or empathize. So it's those three elements that go into, like, when you ask yourself, whose scene is this? Which is what Frank Capra used to ask himself when he would direct a scene. And Frank Capra is a famous American director who did It's a Wonderful Life. But your question about, and I think I understood your question in regards to how do we know that we're doing justice to the written word and to the script when we're making, our own creative choices outside of the mind of the screenwriter. And I would say that, I mean, I don't know if there's any, exact barometer of that, except that, if a screenwriter has really done their job, and you'd imagine they did if the script was optioned or bought and it's going to be made, although it's not always the case. But usually if something is going to be made, it's because it's a good story and it has all the elements that are necessary. And so if that has all the elements, like, doing the story justice doesn't mean that you follow every single word that the screenwriter wrote. But doing the story justice means that whatever that premise is, whatever that relatable fact of life that they were trying to prove and set out to show the world, as long as that stays intact, then you're doing the story justice. So in other words, again, if we go back to Citizen Kane as a script, right, that was in the story. That's what they were trying to show, that, like, no matter how much money and power you amass, that doesn't necessarily bring you peace of mind and happiness and joy in life. That was in the story, right? And so as long as they were communicating that through the visuals, through the acting, through the set decoration, through the wardrobe, as long as all of the choices that were made were serving that, can you move it? As long as they were doing that, then they were being truthful to the script. But again, so being truthful to the script doesn't mean that because the screenwriter wrote screen direction. So screen direction, right, is like when the screenwriter writes, Jonathan walks into the room and sits down into the chair and then looks to his right and says this, right? We're not beholden to that. Because now once the actors are there as a director, it's our job to figure out the physicality of it. It's our job to figure out the blocking. It's our job to figure out how people move and move through space. Because the screenwriter, of course, was writing that because they're seeing the characters and they have to write that because they need to show the producer and anyone else like what it would look like. But they're not on set. They're not with the actors. They haven't been in that physical space. So of course things are going to change, and that's okay. Right? But are we staying true to the original concept, to the original idea, to the original intentions of the character? And if the answer to that is yes, then we are staying truthful to the story and to the script. All the other choices, they're up to us to make as a director.
Okay, Prithviraj, you have something to ask?
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thanks a
Father.
lot.
You're welcome.
Yes, Father.
Yes,
Since,
please.
yes, good evening, Father. Good evening, Jonathan, sir.
Good evening.
Since film is such a popular art form, there is always a compromise between art and commerce. So, has your art or your filmmaking ever been shaped by budget limitations, and how do you get over that?
Uh, I would say, has it ever? I would say it has not. It is not ever not, right? It always comes down to that, right? It always comes down to trade-off, what a budget can support, or what other collaborators think, right? And you're right. It is an art, and at the end of the day, it is a commerce because there are people who invested in it and they want and expect returns on investment. And it's the producer's job to ensure as best they can return on investment. And oftentimes that does set up confrontation between director and producer because the producer is thinking about bottom line, director's thinking about what they envision for the story. And that can be tough, but that is to be expected, right? And so what I always tell myself is that, it truly is through limitations that creativity is born. Or what do they say? That necessity is the mother of all invention. And so if you have to fight against something because you want this location, or you want this particular camera, or you want this particular actor, but you can't support it. Now you have to be creative and think about how else can I tell my story? What else can I do that would also effectively tell my story? And oftentimes that's where the gold is, right? That's where when we're forced against that, that's where creativity really kicks in. So it's actually not a bad thing. If you think about it, it can be a good thing. So that's kind of the mindset that I try to attack it with. Going into it knowing it's going to happen, and then going into it feeling as if it's actually going to result in a better product. But now there are times though where a producer representing the best interest of the studio or the investors sometimes will unnecessarily, at least in my from my viewpoint, my standpoint, unnecessarily enforce decisions upon you. Whether that's casting, right? Casting becomes a big one. And the truth is, and the reality is that unless you're a very famous director in the States, you don't have final say over cast. The producer does. And you don't have final say over the edit. The producer does. The producer has final say over everything, really. Again, because they're representing the money interests. But what I always, try to remind the producer when it comes to situations like that, where we're at a loggerhead over a certain choice, as kindly as I can, in the least passive aggressive way as I can, as I remind them that you hired me for a reason, right? You trusted me to be the steward of this story. You trusted me because of something you saw in my work. You brought me on. Trust me now. Trust in your choices, right? You made the choice to bring me on. Don't second guess the choice you made. Let me make my choices now to make the best product we can make, right? If you're asking me to work with these actors, let me choose the actors to work with. It's like a chef. You wouldn't go into a kitchen and tell the chef, these are your ingredients. The chef would say, these are the ingredients I need to make the meal that we need. And so I try to remind them of that. It's like, I understand we have limitations. I understand that there's budget concerns, but we can make this work. Let me make my choices. I promise you that, if it's going to go over, we'll work it out, right? But yeah, but usually that's where the conflict comes from: the producer representing the money interests and the director wanting just the creative side, and the producer saying, well, this actor, last time they were in a film, it opened up to $20 million in the box office, and you want to use this no-name actor. We're not going to make any money back, right? And so again, you got to kind of remind them that they chose you for a reason. So hopefully that helps and gets to your question. But yes, undoubtedly it is always a trade-off, because as a director, you too want to make money, right? You want your film to make money because you want to work again. Maybe you don't even care about the money side of it, but you need to care about that, because if you want to work again, you need to show return on profit. So I think we have time for one more question. Is it Aman? I see one more hand raised.
Aman?
Yes, sir. Jonathan, sir, thank you so much for conducting this workshop for us. It's a privilege to be here, honestly, and thank you, Father, for organizing this for us. Sir, when you were speaking about filmmaking in general, sir, you talked about using camera angles for connecting to the audience in a way which, the character is feeling inferior in that particular scene. So you keep the camera at that particular angle in a way, connecting emotionally to the audience, and using that angle to project what's going on in this scene and what the character is actually feeling in this scene. So, sir, could you please elaborate a little more about that, because it really, really intrigued me, sir, that particular point about using camera angles and using shots in a way that, the content actually connects with the audience emotionally.
Absolutely. And so again, great question, Aman. So kind of going back, I'll reiterate what I was saying, because I said it very quickly, and it wasn't even a direct answer to a question. It was more about something I wanted to share. So somebody one time asked Frank Capra. Again, Frank Capra is a famous American director. They said, Frank, what is your secret to filmmaking? Your secret to success? How do you direct? And he said, well, what I do is, one of the things I do is that I ask myself, before I design the shots of any given scene, is whose scene is this? Right? Whose scene is it? In other words, asking the question, with whom do I want the audience to empathize? Another way of saying that is, from whose point of view do we understand the scene? Do we understand the story? So not like first person, like through their eyes, but like as we're watching the scene unfold, who are we associating with? Do we understand like how we should feel about the scene? Right? Because again, the characters, the actors, they are our emotional guides, right? We look at them to understand how we should feel. How are they reacting? Because that's how we react. Right? And then we oftentimes imprint ourselves upon them. We put ourselves in their shoes. Like whether we go watch a really cool action film, it's like we envision that we are that cool action hero, or we're watching, you know, whatever type of genre it might be. Anyway, the characters are our emotional guides, right? They're the ones that take us through the story. Well, then in any given scene, then we need to make sure that that relationship or that bond, that connection between the audience and that given character is strong. So how do we create that bond? Well, again, there are three devices that we use to create empathy for our characters. One of them is shot size, right? So in other words, the size of the shot or the size of the character in relation to the frame. And again, that goes back to that proxemics theory that I was talking about. If we feel we are near to a character, if our perceived distance is that of being near to a particular character, we will start to feel as if we know that character intimately, as if they are a friend of ours, right? If we see, like you can do this experiment and you do it for fun, just, you know, take any given scene with two characters or more, and design your shots to where one character is in medium close-ups and close-ups, and the other character or characters are in medium or wide or full shots, and then show it to somebody and ask the audience what happened here. And I promise you, they will tell the story from the character's point of view who's in the close-ups, and they will empathize with them no matter what they do. If you had that character pull out a weapon and hurt the other characters, they will justify it. They will say, well, something must have happened where the character had to do that. And they will simply say that just because they were closer to them. I promise you, if you do that, that's what happened. So that's one way. The other way was the angles that we're talking about. And again, if we think about it, as a director, we can place the audience anywhere. I'm drawing a blank of the director's name right now, but you know, there was a famous director who was talking about the difference between directing for the stage and directing for the screen. And he was saying directing for the stage and the screen, there's some similarities, right? You're working with story and pacing and story and lighting and blocking, right, and movement. But you know, when you're directing for the stage, typically the audience is in a fixed position, right? They're sitting in a chair and things play out on a stage in the proscenium. But in film, it's like you get to pick up that chair and say, hey, look at it from over here. Look at it from back there, or up here, down there, anywhere you want. And so you can choose that angle, you can choose that height of that camera placement. But when doing that, why? Where are you placing the audience? What are you saying to them? What are you showing them? Right? Each shot should introduce new information and have new meaning behind it. So what are you showing them? Why are you doing that? But understanding that the angle of that is going to then dictate the audience's engagement with the character and the scene. And so what I was saying is that, you know, if the closer we get to 0 degrees, which is here, the closer we get as the audience, the closer we put the camera to 0 degrees, the more the audience will empathize with that given character. So if we did another experiment, right? Same experiment where we have like one character who pulls out a weapon and hurts the other character. And let's say you design all the shots and they're all medium shots. You don't go any tighter or any further away, all medium shots. But for the character who actually has the weapon, all of their shots are almost right here. We can see them full, almost right from the front, right? Almost 0 degrees. But all the shots for the other character who gets hurt are at 90 degrees. The audience will empathize with the character who's wielding the weapon simply because they saw more of their face and they can relate to that character more than the person who's at 90 degrees. And then the third one is screen time. And so I know you asked about angles, but we should talk about this too, is screen time. And that is simply that the person with whom the audience spends more time is the person with whom they will associate. So again, if we go back to all things being equal, let's say that you have the same scenario, right? Where we have two characters, right? And you shoot all of them in a medium shot, all of their shots, medium shot, and all of the shots come from 45 degrees. So exact same coverage. But for one character, we spend more time. So we open up the scene with them and they have the preponderance of the time. So let's say the scene is like 30 seconds and there's 20 seconds when they're on screen and 10 seconds when the other person's on screen. The audience will empathize with the person they spent more time. And so again, it's kind of knowing those things that, and knowing what do I want my audience to feel and think about my characters. Knowing those things then helps us design those shots in relation to size, angle, and then duration of shot. And so that's what I meant about emotion and connectivity. And again, try that. Like if you have a camera and you have two friends who are willing to be your actors, and you don't need to write some elaborate scene, just do that, design the shots and edit that, and then show it to people and say, what did you understand? And I promise you that they'll be like, oh, well, I don't really understand the full story, but something happened and that character was justified in doing what they did. Well, why do you say that? They'll say it because of the way you design the shots. And it's interesting, like you can tell, like you can have the same set of actions, the same set of dialogue. And if you just like reverse it, like let's say in one scenario, you put all of like the emphasis on one character and you used all three of those techniques, shot size, angle, and screen time. And then you flipped it and did it for the other character, but you didn't change anything, their actions or change any of the dialogue, their answer will completely flip. And so again, it's about, at the end of the day, it's about manipulating the audience, right? It's about understanding how they're going to understand it and making them feel what we want them to feel. Hope that makes some sense, Aman.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much. It really helped us, sir.
Yeah, I'm happy to help, and thank you for the questions. And again, thank you all for being there on a Friday evening. That means that you have some dedication. There's 172 of y'all, which is great to see that. And so, again, I'm at this point. I think I do see one more raised hand, but unfortunately I'm up against it myself. I have a 10 a.m. meeting that I need to attend. But thank you, Father, for sharing the space, for organizing this. Thank you all for being wonderful attendees and bearing with our technical difficulties at the beginning, and then kind of bearing through just looking at my face for the past hour and a half and hearing me talk. But hopefully, minus the visuals that I intended to show, take some of this. Hopefully, you took some notes, but take some of this into your next viewing of a film or a show or a commercial, whatever it is, and think about what your what has been said and how you can decipher and think about what the director is trying to communicate to you.
Thank you, Jonathan.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, actually, Jonathan. That was actually lovely. And we do teach actually all this, but you are with your experience. It's a vast experience. We could see that as actually Amlan was so much taken up with this, the proximity and so on. That was actually beautiful, and that angles and the shots, the vision that you have spoken is everything actually connected to the storytelling. And the storytelling is really is important. That's what actually you told us, and it's lovely. Great to have you. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Lizzie and Smriti. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Our pleasure.
Oh, Smriti, you're muted.
So all of you who are actually attending this, thank you so much for coming at this time and attending this lovely masterclass. We hope to have actually more like this. Okay, thank you so much.
Absolutely. We're
Thank you,
happy.
thank you, Lizzie. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.